The voice was faint, shaky, cracked, almost like the last breath of someone slipping away. Farida froze. At first she thought it was the wind playing tricks. She had been tired, hungry, and weak all day. Maybe she was hearing things. Then it came again. This time it was louder, clear, human, and full of unbearable pain. Her heart slammed violently against her ribs. With trembling steps, she moved toward the bushes, her hand brushing aside the leaves. What she saw made her blood run cold. A young man lay on the ground, half dead, half alive, his clothes torn, his body bruised, his skin smeared with dirt and blood. He looked like someone who had crawled out of death and hadn't yet decided if he wanted to stay alive. Farida's breath caught. She stood frozen, unable to move, unable to think. Shakily, she forced the words out of her mouth. "What happened to you? Who are you?" The man lifted his head slowly, painfully.
"Help me, please.
His eyes filled with confusion and fear. "Please," he whispered. "Help me. I can't remember anything."
I am dying.
He collapsed again, breathing hard, and that was it. Something deep inside Farida cracked open. A place filled with old wounds she thought she had buried, because she knew what it meant to be lost, to be helpless, to have no one to call your own. She touched his shoulder gently. "It's okay. I'm here. You're safe." But for Farida, safe had always been an illusion. Farida had once been a girl with a complete family, a warm home, a loving father, and a gentle mother whose laughter filled every corner of their small clay house. She remembered those days like distant dreams. But everything shattered the year her father remarried. Her stepmother arrived with a bright, painted smile but eyes filled with secrets. Farida didn't know that smile hid envy sharp enough to kill. Whispers began early in the village. People said her stepmother visited shrines at strange hours. People said she didn't like competition. People said her beauty hid something dark. Farida never believed it. Not until the morning she woke up to find her mother cold, her spirit gone, her body still. Her father cried deeply for weeks. Farida cried longer, but her stepmother didn't shed a tear. And a few years later, her father died suddenly too, another mysterious death. Farida was only 14, orphaned, and thrown into a house where she was unwelcome. Her stepmother's true colors showed instantly: insults, cruel tasks, starvation, humiliation. Her stepsister mocked her clothes and beauty. Her stepbrother would pour water on her while she slept, laughing as she woke up shaking and cold. Her stepmother would say, "You will suffer for your mother's stubbornness. Suffer until you become nothing." Farida lived through years of pain until she finally escaped, running away the night after her stepmother raised a broom to beat her like an animal. She never looked back. The past shaped her into what she was now, a quiet young woman who sold smoked fish to survive, living alone in a tiny wooden hut at the edge of the village. That very evening, just before she heard the whisper in the forest, she had been walking home from the market, heartbroken. She hadn't sold anything that day, not even one piece of fish. Her stomach was empty, her pockets empty, her future empty. If she didn't sell tomorrow, she wouldn't eat. She walked along the forest path, the evening sun dipping behind the tall trees, spilling long shadows across the dusty road. She felt tired, invisible, forgotten by life. And then, "Help me."
Help me.
The whisper that changed everything.
Somebody.
The cry that led her to the bleeding young man. The stranger with the bruised face, trembling breath, and lost memory. She looked at him now, still lying helpless on the ground. He looked up weakly, his eyes half closed. "Please," he whispered again, "don't leave me. I don't know who I am." Farida swallowed hard, her voice softening, trembling. "Don't worry," she whispered back. "You're not alone anymore." She reached out, gently lifting him into her arms, and with the last rays of the evening sun fading behind them, Farida made the choice that would change her life forever. The night had settled over the forest like a heavy, velvet cloak. Crickets hummed in the distance, and the occasional rustle of leaves whispered secrets only the night could hold. Farida's hut, fragile as it looked under the pale moonlight, felt like the only safe world for the young man she had just rescued. Chukwuma lay on the thin mattress, bruised and battered, his body wrapped in rough bandages. Blood had dried in places, and every movement sent a shiver of pain through him. Farida's fingers were careful, gentle and steady as she checked each wound, adjusted the cloths, and made sure he was comfortable. "Careful," she whispered. "I don't want to hurt you more." Chukwuma's eyes flickered open, slow and cautious. They were sharp, but clouded with confusion. He searched her face, hesitating to speak, as though measuring whether he could trust her. "You don't have to speak," Farida continued softly. "Just rest. That's all that matters right now." He blinked, then relaxed fractionally, letting her presence anchor him. It was a small act, yet it carried a weight he hadn't felt in days, maybe even weeks. Hours crept by. Farida moved silently through the small space, fetching water, tidying the hut, murmuring small reassurances whenever Chukwuma flinched in his sleep. She had learnt the art of quiet care through her own hardships. Through nights she had slept hungry, beaten, humiliated, and alone. Chukwuma noticed everything. The careful way she adjusted his arm, the faint rustle of her hand smoothing a wrinkle in his bandages, the soft murmur of her voice as she whispered, "It's all right. I've got you." The following days became a delicate rhythm. Farida woke early, preparing small meals and tending to Chukwuma's injuries. She moved through the motions with patience that seemed endless, her attention meticulous in a way that both unnerved and soothed him. Chukwuma, though physically weak, began regaining small measures of independence. He helped where he could, fetching water, adjusting the mattress, doing minor chores. But mostly he observed. The consistency of her care slowly began to quiet the storm inside him. Each morning, he found himself noticing details he had never paid attention to before. The sunlight slanting across her hair, the faint aroma of smoke and herbs from her cooking, the way her hands moved with grace and purpose. Every small detail etched itself into him. For Farida, it was the first time in years that she felt needed for something beyond survival. Each glance he offered, each small nod, even the silent way he accepted her care, reminded her that she could be more than the girl who had escaped her stepmother's cruelty. By the end of the week, Farida decided to return to the market. She carried her basket of smoked fish, her mind preoccupied with Chukwuma's welfare and the hope of selling enough to eat. The market was alive with the chatter of vendors, the clatter of baskets, and the mingling scents of fried yams, fish, and smoke. Farida placed her basket carefully, arranging each piece of fish as neatly as she could. What happened next surprised her. Every single fish sold. Coin by coin, piece by piece, her basket emptied until not a single one remained. Women whispered among themselves in disbelief. The quiet girl sold all her fish? Perhaps the gods are favoring her today. Farida felt a warmth she hadn't experienced in months. For some reason, it felt as if Chukwuma's presence, the very act of caring for him, had shifted her luck. Back at the hut, she unpacked the coins, counting carefully. Chukwuma watched her silently, noting the small light in her eyes as she realized she had succeeded. When she caught his gaze, she smiled softly, and for the first time since he had arrived, Chukwuma returned it. A faint, almost imperceptible smile, but one that carried a weight far deeper than words could express. As Farida moved about the hut, Chukwuma allowed himself to reflect. Her care, the patience, the attention to detail, he had never felt anything like it. He noticed Farida's exhaustion, the way her hands trembled slightly after a long day, the subtle lines around her eyes that told stories of survival, resilience, and pain. His chest tightened. He didn't understand why, but something about the combination of her strength and fragility made his heart stir. It came at the end of the week, quietly, almost imperceptibly. Farida had dozed briefly on the mattress beside him, exhaustion overtaking her. Chukwuma, sitting upright to fetch water, paused as he watched her chest rise and fall in rhythm with her breathing. A warmth surged through him. Something unfamiliar, electric, and tentative. He realized with a start that his chest ached slightly at the thought of her being vulnerable, at the thought of someone else seeing her like this. When Farida awoke, she caught him looking, and their eyes met. A long, wordless moment stretched between them. No words were spoken, but the tension was undeniable. Something subtle had shifted. Curiosity, care, and perhaps the faint beginnings of the spark that would grow into something more. Chukwuma looked away first, a small, almost shy smile brushing his lips. Farida's cheeks warmed. Neither spoke. Yet the world seemed to have contracted to that tiny, quiet hut, their lives intertwined in ways neither could fully articulate. The morning sun spilled softly into Farida's hut, casting a fragile glow across the thin mattress where Chukwuma sat. His body had regained strength, but his eyes were distant, clouded with confusion. The weight of something lost pressed heavily on him. I am troubled, he said quietly, almost to himself. I don't even know who I am anymore. Can't seem to find my way home. Can't remember where I belong. Farida's chest tightened. She knelt beside him, her hand brushing lightly over his arm. Chukwuma, I don't know what happened to you, she whispered. But I'll help you find your way. Rest now. He nodded, but the hollow ache in his chest lingered. He stared at the floor, grappling with the emptiness that had replaced all certainty. A few days later, Chukwuma followed Farida to the market. The village bustled with life. Women called out their wares, children darted between stalls, and the smell of smoked fish and freshly fried yams drifted through the air. Chukwuma's mind was quieter than usual, but there was a strange tug at the edges of his memory, a faint whisper that made his pulse quicken. Then she appeared, Ada, his cousin. Her eyes widened as she saw him, recognition flashing across her face. Chukwuma, she cried, rushing toward him. Before he could move, she wrapped him in a tight embrace. For a moment, Chukwuma froze. There was something familiar in the warmth of the hug, something that reached deep into his chest, but his mind betrayed him. The memories were missing. He stepped back, confusion clouding his features. I don't know you, he said softly. Ada's face fell, tears glimmering in the corners of her eyes. Her voice trembled. It's me, Ada, your cousin. Don't you remember me? Chukwuma shook his head. The warmth of her presence clashed painfully with the emptiness inside him. He could feel her hope, her fear, her love, but he could not place it. Farida's chest tightened. Her hands itched to reach out, but she remained rooted to the spot. A flutter of something strange rose in her chest. A sudden, quiet jealousy at how easily Ada had hugged him. And yet, she could not hate her. Not when the young woman's grief was so real. Ada slowly pulled back, her arms falling to her sides. She gave him one last, lingering look, eyes shimmering with unshed tears, and turned away. Every step she took was heavy. Her shoulders bowed as though the weight of knowing and not being recognized pressed down on her. Farida felt the ache too, mirrored in the quiet tension lingering in the air. Chukwuma watched her walk away, heart racing, mind confused. Why did her touch feel so familiar? Why did it hurt so much to let her go? He couldn't understand, couldn't place it, but deep down, a small, unnameable emotion tugged at him, a piece of himself he had yet to uncover. That night, Chukwuma lay on the mattress, a throbbing headache racking his head. His body was healed, but his mind refused to rest. As he drifted into uneasy sleep, fragments of memory began to surface in flashes. A hall filled with sunlight, laughter echoing through familiar corridors, the smell of burning palm oil and firewood. He glimpsed voices calling his name, urgent and familiar. A man with sharp eyes and greed in his smile. Shadows of betrayal and fear. The pieces began to fit together slowly. The night he had collapsed under the sun, bleeding and alone. It was not a random misfortune. Someone had tried to take his life. The pain, the struggle, the strike to his head. It was all part of an attempt on him. Someone wanted him gone. And then the truth settled over him, heavy and undeniable. He was not just a young man wandering through misfortune. He was a prince. The heir to a kingdom, born to a father whose power and legacy were threatened by ambition and envy. The realization struck like lightning. The forest, the blood, the long crawl, the day he met Farida, it all made sense now. Chukwuma leaned back, chest tight, eyes wide. The world felt impossibly larger and smaller all at once. Farida had saved him without knowing the truth. She had cradled the life of a prince in her hands, nursed him back from the edge of death, and never once faltered. Farida moved quietly, unaware of the storm of revelations raging in his mind. She placed a cup of warm water beside him, glanced at him with concern, and settled back, her presence a tether to this fragile new reality. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the village in shades of gold and shadow. The day had ended, but the weight of what was to come pressed upon them both. Chukwuma's identity, the threat against him, and the bond forming with Farida promised a future fraught with peril and impossible choices. And somewhere deep within, a small spark stirred. The beginnings of trust, gratitude, and perhaps something far more dangerous, something that could grow into love. That evening, Ada arrived at Igbodaga, her legs weary, her chest heaving from the long journey. She barely paused at the gates of the royal palace before racing through the grand halls, the echo of her hurried footsteps bouncing off the marble walls. Her eyes were wide, glimmering with tears, and her voice trembled with urgency as she cried out, "Father, Mother, I saw him. The prince. He's alive. I swear it's him." The king's younger brother, lounging arrogantly in the corner, let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Mechionu, keep quiet, girl. How can you claim to see a ghost? Stop your nonsense." Ada's gaze burned with determination, refusing to be silenced. "I'm not lying. It's him. I hugged him myself. I saw him. You must believe me." The queen, however, could not be dismissed. Her hands flew to her face, trembling uncontrollably, her voice breaking into a raw, heart-wrenching cry. "No, no, it cannot be. My son, my only son, alive after all these days." She stumbled forward, barely able to stand under the weight of the shock and the surge of emotion. Tears streamed freely down her cheeks, her sobs echoing through the hall. Her entire body shook, as if the years of fear and mourning had been compressed into this single, overwhelming moment. The king, gravely ill, shifted uneasily, but the queen's voice rang with unwavering determination. "Enough of doubt and hesitation," she said, though her voice cracked with tears. "We must see for ourselves. Send a convoy into Ofong Pit at first light. If my son lives, I will not rest until I hold him in my arms. I will not wait another day." At dawn, the royal convoy set out from Igbodaga to Ofunkpit. The morning air was crisp, and the sound of marching guards and rolling carriages carried across the countryside. Villagers along the road whispered among themselves, suspicion and curiosity mingling with the rising sun. By midday, the convoy had reached Igbodaga. Word spread quickly. The prince had returned. The villagers' whispers turned to cries of joy, their voices swelling into a chorus as they caught sight of him walking among them. Children ran ahead, women waved shawls, and the air vibrated with celebration. The lost prince had returned. Meanwhile, in Ofunkpit, Farida moved through the bustling morning market, unaware of the plans unfolding in Igbodaga. The stalls were alive with shouting vendors, children darting between baskets of fish and vegetables, and the salty scent of the sea clinging to the air. Her basket, balanced on her head, was empty after the successful day's sales, yet her mind wandered elsewhere, caught in the quiet rhythms of her simple life. She had no idea that, just that morning after she left for the market, Chukwuma had been quietly taken under the brightness of the early morning sun, escorted toward his kingdom. It was only upon returning home later that day that she realized something was terribly wrong. The door to her small hut was wide open. A cold knot of panic clenched her chest as she stepped inside, eyes scanning for him. Perhaps he had gone to the backyard. Perhaps he had been distracted. But the hut was empty. Maybe he forgot to lock it, she whispered, but the words rang hollow. The silence of the empty room pressed in on her, heavy and unforgiving. He had left, disappeared without a word, leaving no trace, no explanation, no goodbye. For 3 long days, Farida wandered through the village, her heart heavy with a mixture of rage and grief. She cursed him silently for leaving her so abruptly, for not appreciating her care, for not even saying goodbye while a stubborn, quiet part of her held on to hope, whispering that somehow he might return. She could neither eat nor sleep, and every corner of her small world reminded her of his absence. Back in Igbodaga, Chukwuma's gaze, however, was not on the cheering villagers. His mind churned with fury and recollection. He remembered the treachery, the friends who had lured him into danger, the ambush that had left him bleeding and broken, the blow to his head that had stolen his memories. Rage burned in him, focused and precise, as he scanned the crowd for the conspirators who had dared to threaten his life. They were seized swiftly, thrown into the village prison with no food or comfort, forced to rot under the weight of their betrayal. And then he saw the mastermind, his uncle, the king's younger brother. The man's smug arrogance faltered as Chukwuma's eyes met his, cold, unforgiving, and unyielding. Justice had finally arrived. Far away, Farida sat in her empty hut, oblivious to the triumphs and vengeance unfolding in Igbodaga. Her heart still ached with absence, every empty corner a reminder of his disappearance. She could only wait, helpless, feeling the weight of his absence press like stone upon her chest. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a small ember of hope flickered, fragile, persistent, whispering that the story was far from over. Few days later, the grand hall of Igbodaga Palace was quiet except for the murmurs of the elders.
Draped in ceremonial robes, they stepped forward, their faces solemn. The prince, the kingdom, requires a wife, one of the elders announced, his voice steady, carrying the weight of tradition. Chukwuma sat quietly, eyes fixed on the polished floor, yet his mind was far away. As the words echoed in the hall, his thoughts drifted to Farida. He remembered her, the girl who had nursed him, fed him, and cared for him when he was half dead, bleeding under the sun. The girl who had shown him kindness when the world had abandoned him. And then, he remembered those nights. The memory was sharp and vivid. Farida had wrapped her arms around him after he had confessed how lost he felt. Their lips had met, deep, raw, filled with longing, with everything they had felt but had never spoken. The world had fallen away. The warmth of her body against his, the trembling of her hands, the way she had clung to him, all of it flooded his mind like fire and water at once. He could almost feel the taste of her lips, the pulse of her heartbeat, the quiet intimacy of that night. The flashback struck him with a force that made the words of the elders fade away. The maidens, the palace, the ritual. None of it mattered. Only she mattered. His chest tightened. His heart ached with longing, hope, and certainty. Farida was the one. No ritual, no ceremony, no tradition could compare to the bond they had forged through care, courage, and love. Without hesitation, Chukwuma rose. Guards followed in silence, sensing the urgency in their prince. The journey to Ofunkpete was swift, and when they arrived, the village seemed to hold its breath. Farida was busy packing her basket, preparing for the market. She hummed softly as she arranged the fish and vegetables, unaware that the prince had come for her. She reached for the lid of her basket when a soft, deliberate knock came at the door. Her hand froze mid-air. Who could that be so early? She whispered, tension tightening her chest. She opened the door slowly, and her eyes widened. Standing there, alive, regal, and yet the same man she had known was Chukwuma. For a moment, she did not move. Her chest tightened further, and she threw her face away, not meeting his eyes. The man she had loved, cared for, and even hated in moments of frustration was here, and yet she held herself back, unsure how to react. Chukwuma knelt to the ground. The guards who had followed him were shocked. An Igbo dagger prince kneeling in a village hut, pleading before a woman. It was unprecedented. Some of the guards exchanged glances, unsure what to do. Even the fish in her basket seemed forgotten, silently witnessing the reunion. Hours passed as Chukwuma explained everything. How he had been dragged forcefully from her heart that day and couldn't say goodbye. How he ended up bleeding under the sun when she found him. How the mastermind behind the attack was his uncle. And finally, how he knew he could not live without her. Farida's tears fell freely. Her walls crumbled. Her heart opened completely. She embraced him, holding him tightly, taking in his presence, his smell, the warmth of his body. They stayed like that, minutes stretching into eternity, while the guards looked away shyly, and the small basket of fish seemed to smile quietly at the reunion. The next day, the palace prepared for the traditional feast. Maidens from across the kingdom arrived, their beauty, influence, and pride on full display. Some whispered about their curves, some about their father's positions in the council, each convinced they would capture the prince's favor. Then, suddenly, from the palace entrance, emerged Farida, dressed in royal gold, hand in hand with Chukwuma's mother. King Chukwuma rose, declaring firmly, "This is the woman I choose, the woman who shall stand beside me as my wife and the queen of Igbodaga kingdom." Gasps and murmurs swept through the hall. The maidens were stunned, some outraged, some whispering curses. The chiefs exchanged confused glances. None of the people had seen her before, but the choice was clear. Farida, the girl who had saved a bleeding stranger, who had shown love and care beyond measure, was to be the prince's wife. That night, the palace balcony glowed under the setting sun. Chukwuma held Farida's hand gently. "Thank you," he whispered, voice low, filled with emotion, "for saving me that day, for giving me hope when I had none, for being everything I needed before I even knew it." Farida smiled softly, tears glimmering in her eyes. "And I thank you," she replied, "for trusting me, for letting me love you, and for choosing me." They stayed like that, holding each other, while the kingdom below slept. Love had triumphed, not by wealth, beauty, or power, but by courage, kindness, and hearts that had found each other in the harshest of times. Thank you so much, guys. Please do not forget to like the video, comment below, and most importantly, please subscribe to the channel. Bye.